I never imagined our dream vacation savings would disappear into the hands of another man. We had been saving for over 2 years. Every spare penny went into that jar, every overtime hour at work, every little side job we could pick up. We had our eyes set on a tropical paradise, a place where we could forget the world, reconnect, and enjoy the life we had built together. Or so I thought. One day, I came home earlier than usual, excited to surprise her with the final amount we needed. I walked into the house, and the first thing I noticed was the jar. It was empty, completely wiped out. My heart sank, and a cold wave of confusion washed over me. My mind raced with possibilities, a break-in, a mistake. But then, I noticed her phone on the table, buzzing with messages. Against my better judgment, I picked it up. The name on the screen wasn't one I recognized, but the message was clear. "Thanks for the money, babe. I can't wait to see you tonight." My stomach turned, and I felt a mixture of anger, betrayal, and disbelief. How could she do this to me? To us? I confronted her that night. She didn't deny it. Instead, she tried to justify it, saying that our relationship had been dead for a while and that she found someone who made her feel alive again. The vacation money, she said, was a way for her to start fresh with him. It wasn't just the money, though. It was the trust, the memories of all the times we had planned, laughed, and dreamed about that trip together. I was left standing in the ruins of what I thought was our life, realizing that every sacrifice I made was taken for granted, and the future I was working toward was being shared with someone else. As the days passed, I tried to make sense of what had happened. We had been together for so long. How could she throw it all away so easily? I thought back to the early days of our relationship when everything was new and exciting. We would stay up late talking about our hopes and dreams, planning for the future. We had so many plans, and that vacation was supposed to be a symbol of all that we had worked for together. But now, all I could think about was how she had used me. I had been working extra shifts, sacrificing my time and energy, all for a future that didn't include me. I felt like a fool for not seeing the signs earlier. Maybe I had been too focused on the future to notice what was happening in the present. Maybe I had been too trusting, too willing to believe that we were on the same page. I couldn't stop replaying our conversations in my mind, trying to figure out where things had gone wrong. I remembered the way she used to look at me, the way she would smile when we talked about our plans. Was it all a lie? Had she been planning this from the beginning? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had been blind to the reality of our relationship. I started to notice things that I had ignored before, little signs that something was off. She had been distant lately, more focused on her phone than on our conversations. She had been spending more time out of the house, claiming that she was meeting up with friends or running errands. I had believed her, trusting that she was telling the truth. But now, I couldn't help but wonder if she had been lying to me all along. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I had been so focused on building a future for us that I hadn't noticed that she had already moved on. She had taken our savings, the money we had both worked so hard for, and used it to start a new life with someone else. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the betrayal, the realization that I had been living in a lie. I started to withdraw from the people around me. I didn't want to talk to anyone about what had happened. I didn't want to admit that I had been played for a fool. I felt embarrassed, ashamed that I had been so naive. How could I have missed the signs? How could I have let this happen? But the truth was, I didn't want to face the reality of my situation. I didn't want to accept that the woman I loved had betrayed me. It was easier to blame myself, to believe that I had somehow caused this to happen. Maybe if I had been more attentive, more caring, she wouldn't have felt the need to look elsewhere. Maybe if I had been more of what she wanted, she wouldn't have left. These thoughts consumed me, keeping me awake at night as I replayed every moment of our relationship in my mind. I couldn't stop thinking about what I could have done differently, how I could have prevented this from happening. But deep down, I knew that it wasn't my fault. She had made her choice, and there was nothing I could have done to change that. As time went on, I realized that I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep holding on to the past, to the idea of a future that no longer existed. I had to move on, to let go of the anger and the pain. It wasn't easy. Every time I thought I was making progress, something would remind me of her, and the wound would reopen. But I knew that I had to keep going, to find a way to rebuild my life. I started by focusing on myself, on the things that made me happy. I reconnected with old friends, took up hobbies that I had neglected, and started to explore new interests. It wasn't a quick process, but slowly, I began to feel like myself again. I began to see that there was life beyond the pain, that there was a future that didn't involve her. One day, I decided to take a trip by myself. It wasn't the tropical paradise we had planned, but it was something I needed to do for myself. I packed my bags, booked a ticket, and set off on an adventure. It was liberating to be on my own, to explore new places and meet new people without the weight of the past dragging me down. As I traveled, I began to see the world in a new light. I realized that I had been so focused on building a future with her that I had forgotten about my own dreams, my own desires. I had been living for someone else, and in doing so, I had lost a part of myself. This trip was a way to reclaim that, to rediscover who I was and what I wanted out of life. I visited places I had always wanted to see, tried new foods, and experienced different cultures. Each day was a new adventure, a new opportunity to learn and grow, and with each passing day, the pain of the past began to fade. I started to see that life was full of possibilities, that there was so much more out there than what I had lost. But even as I moved forward, there were moments when the past would creep back in. I would see a couple holding hands, and it would remind me of what I had lost. I would hear a song that we used to listen to together, and it would bring back memories of happier times. But instead of letting these moments pull me back into the darkness, I used them as motivation to keep moving forward. I realized that healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about learning from it. It was about accepting what had happened and using it as a stepping stone to build a better future. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could change how I responded to it. I could choose to let it define me, or I could choose to rise above it. As my trip came to an end, I found myself standing on a beach, watching the sunset. It was a moment of reflection, a chance to look back on everything that had happened and everything that was yet to come. I realized that I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for, that I had the power to create the life I wanted, regardless of what had happened in the past. When I returned home, I felt different. I felt lighter, freer, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I knew that I still had a long way to go, but I also knew that I was on the right path. I had let go of the anger, the pain, and the regret. I had accepted what had happened and made peace with it. But moving on wasn't as simple as I thought it would be. The emptiness inside me refused to dissipate, and there were nights where I lay awake, haunted by the echoes of her betrayal. Each time I thought I was getting better, something would drag me back into the past. One such night, I was scrolling through social media mindlessly, trying to distract myself from my thoughts. I came across a post from a mutual friend that I hadn't spoken to in years. It was a photo of a group of people at a restaurant, and there she was, sitting next to him, the guy she had left me for. They looked happy, carefree, like nothing had ever gone wrong. Seeing her with him was like a punch to the gut. I knew I had to move on, but seeing her so happy with someone else hurt more than I expected. It made me question everything all over again. Was she really happier without me? Had I been holding her back all this time? The pain of it all threatened to overwhelm me, and I knew I had to get out of my own head. I decided to reach out to a therapist, someone who could help me make sense of what I was feeling. It wasn't an easy step to take. I had always prided myself on being strong, on handling things on my own. But I realized that sometimes strength comes from knowing when to ask for help. Therapy was a revelation. It helped me see things from a new perspective, to understand that what had happened wasn't a reflection of my worth, but rather a result of her choices. I learned to let go of the guilt, the self-blame, and the anger. It was a slow process, but with each session, I began to feel more like myself again. I also began to understand that healing isn't linear. There would be good days and bad days, and that was okay. What mattered was that I was making progress, that I was moving forward, even if it was just one step at a time. As I worked through my feelings, I started to rebuild my life. I focused on my career, on hobbies that I had neglected, and on building relationships with people who truly cared about me. I reconnected with old friends, made new ones, and slowly but surely, I began to find joy in life again. One day, I received a message from her. She said she wanted to talk, to explain things, to make amends. I wasn't sure how to feel about it. Part of me wanted to hear her out, to get closure, but another part of me didn't want to reopen old wounds. After much deliberation, I decided to meet her. We met at a cafe, a place we used to go to together. As I sat across from her, I realized that she wasn't the person I remembered. She looked the same, but there was something different about her, something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. She seemed nervous, unsure of herself, and it made me wonder if she had regrets about how things had ended. She started by apologizing, saying that she had been selfish, that she hadn't thought about how her actions would affect me. She admitted that she had been caught up in the excitement of something new, that she had been looking for a way to escape from the monotony of our relationship. She said she was sorry for how things had ended, and that she wished she had handled things differently. I listened, but I didn't feel the anger or hurt that I expected to feel. Instead, I felt a strange sense of detachment, like I was watching the conversation from a distance. I realized that I had already made peace with what had happened, that I didn't need her apology to move on. When she finished, I told her that I appreciated her words, but that I had already moved on. I told her that I didn't hold any grudges, but that I also didn't see the need to dwell on the past. We had both made our choices, and we had to live with them. As we parted ways, I felt a sense of closure, a final chapter in a story that I had been trying to finish for so long. I realized that I didn't need her to make amends or to explain herself. I had already found the closure I needed within myself. In the months that followed, I continued to focus on my own growth and happiness. I started dating again, taking things slow and being mindful of what I wanted in a relationship. I wasn't in a rush to settle down. I wanted to make sure that I was with someone who valued and respected me for who I was. I also made a conscious effort to focus on the positives in my life. I started a gratitude journal, writing down things that I was thankful for each day. It helped me shift my focus away from the past and towards the present, towards the things that brought me joy and fulfillment. As time went on, I found that the pain of what had happened began to fade. It wasn't that I forgot about it, but rather that it no longer had a hold on me. I had learned to let go, to accept that life doesn't always go as planned, and that sometimes the detours we take lead us to places we never imagined. I also learned the importance of self-care, of taking time to nurture my own well-being. I started practicing mindfulness, meditation, and exercise, all things that help me stay grounded and focused on the present moment. I realized that in order to be happy, I needed to take care of myself first and foremost. Looking back now, I see that what happened was a turning point in my life. It forced me to confront my own insecurities, to question what I wanted out of life, and to make changes that ultimately led me to a better place. It wasn't an easy journey, but it was one that I'm grateful for, because it made me stronger, wiser, and more resilient. And now, as I stand here, looking out at the world with fresh eyes, I know that I'm ready for whatever comes next. I'm no longer held back by the past. Instead, I'm focused on the future, on the endless possibilities that lie ahead. So if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that life is unpredictable. Things don't always go as planned, and sometimes the people we trust the most will let us down. But it's how we respond to those challenges that defines us, that shapes who we are and who we will become. I've let go of the need to know, to keep tabs on her life. She made her choice, and I've made mine. I wish her well, but I've moved on. I've built a new life for myself, one that's full of possibilities and free from the shadows of the past. Now, when I look at that empty jar, I don't see loss or betrayal. I see a reminder of how far I've come, of the journey I've taken to get to where I am today. It's a symbol of resilience, of the power of healing, and of the importance of never losing sight of who you are and what you deserve. In the end, the money didn't matter. What mattered was the journey, the lessons learned, and the strength gained along the way. And that, I've learned, is something no one can ever take away from you. I never thought that I could be so deceived by my own brother. Since childhood, my younger brother has been my best friend. We grew up together, sharing everything from toys to secrets. I always felt obliged to take care of him, because he was younger and often got into trouble. When we grew up, I got married and started my life from scratch, but my relationship with my brother remained strong. Or so it seemed to me. My wife and I have been saving up for a long time for a big vacation. It was something special for us, something we were looking forward to, an escape from the daily routine and the opportunity to spend time together. We dreamed of traveling to Europe, planning to visit Paris, Rome, and Barcelona. But just a couple of months before the trip, my brother asked me for help. He got into debt, serious debts, and seeing no other way out, he came to me. I didn't think twice. My wife and I decided that we could lend him some of our savings, because family always came first. It was our way of showing that we are always there, no matter the circumstances. I was sure that my brother would return the money as soon as he could, and our trip would just be postponed for a couple of months. However, the more I delved into his story, the more worried I became about his behavior. He began to avoid talking about money, became irritable, and began to shy away from meetings with me. It's been a few days since our last conversation, when he asked me to lend him money. I started noticing strange things. My wife also became more nervous and began to spend more time outside the house. I attributed it to her fatigue or stress at work, unaware that the root of the problems was much deeper. The day I decided to go to my brother's house without warning to talk face to face, I did not expect what I would see. As I drove up to his house, I noticed his car parked on the side of the road. Surprisingly, he wasn't alone. Near his house, I saw the figure of a woman, and this woman was my wife. At first, I thought it was some kind of misunderstanding. My wife could have come to my brother for a friendly visit or to discuss our refund plan. But something inside alerted me. My heart started pounding, and my mind refused to believe what I was about to find out. When I quietly came closer and looked through the window, I saw something that turned my world upside down. They were sitting at a table, exchanging documents and money. I couldn't hear what they were talking about, but the expressions on their faces said more than the words. It wasn't just a business meeting. There was tension in the air, as if they were doing something they didn't want anyone to know about. They both looked guilty, but they didn't stop. And at that moment, I realized that it wasn't just about the money. My whole life, my ideas of loyalty and trust began to crumble like a house of cards. After that day, I began to keep a close eye on both of them. I didn't know what to do, and I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I also couldn't ignore my growing anxiety. It took several days before I decided to talk to my wife. In my heart, I was preparing for the worst, but nothing could prepare me for her confession. We were sitting in the living room when I asked her why she was dating my brother behind my back. At first, she tried to assure me that it was an innocent gathering, that she only wanted to help him deal with his problems. But her voice was trembling, and I could see that she was hiding something. I insisted on the truth, and after long minutes of silence and intense silence, she finally confessed. It turned out that my brother had been jealous of me for a long time. He felt that I was living better, that I was doing well, and he couldn't accept it. It always seemed to him that I was taking away all the good things in his life: parental attention, academic and career success, even his personal life. And so, he decided to take back what he thought belonged to him. My wife was part of his plan. They started dating secretly about a year ago. It all started with innocent conversations, but quickly turned into something more. He convinced her that she deserved better, that he could give her what I couldn't, and she, perhaps influenced by his manipulations, began to believe him. Every minute she told her story, I felt my heart tighten. She said that initially it was just a desire to help him, but then he suggested that she run away together, using our money to start a new life. He instilled in her that I would not be able to understand her, I would not be able to give her what she wanted, and that she would be happy with him. When I asked her why she agreed, her response was icy. I wanted something new, and he offered it to me. That answer tore me apart, but I understood that they were both to blame. I pulled away from them, gradually destroying all the ties that once seemed indestructible, but I didn't want to do it right away. I needed time to realize the depth of betrayal. I began to piece together more and more facts, discovering that their collusion began long before I knew the truth. They deceived me by living a double life, and all the while I was blinded by my trust in them. I began to notice how often my brother called my wife, how they exchanged glances when they thought I wasn't noticing. Everything that I had ignored earlier has now become clear. After all, I hired a private investigator to find out the whole truth. I couldn't just sit and watch my life crumble without knowing all the details. A few weeks later, I received a report that confirmed my worst fears. Their relationship lasted longer than I could have imagined, and they planned to run away together, leaving me with nothing. It took several months before I was able to gather all the evidence and file for divorce. My wife did not try to fight for the preservation of the marriage, and this only confirmed her guilt. I realized that I had lost not only my wife, but also my brother. He also lost everything he had because I severed all ties with him and made sure that our family found out the truth about his betrayal. His parents were stunned when they found out about his act, and although they tried to be neutral, their disappointment was obvious. Every day, I gathered more and more facts, discovering that their collusion began long before I knew the truth. My brother and wife lived a double life masquerading as innocents, and I became a victim of their insidious plan. They deceived me not only with money, but also with love, betraying all the principles that I thought bound us. When I finally got rid of this nightmare, it took me a long time to come to my senses. Friends and family tried to support me, but I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. I had to start my life from scratch, from a clean slate, and it wasn't easy. But I have learned to trust people again, although the wounds of this betrayal will remain with me for the rest of my life. This story is not about money, but about trust that has been betrayed in the most terrible way. And if she taught me anything, it's that trust is the most valuable thing we have, and it needs to be kept as the apple of our eye. I also realize that sometimes those whom we consider the closest can turn out to be the most dangerous enemies. But this was only the beginning of my new path. Soon after the divorce, I began to notice that in our city, people started talking about my brother and ex-wife. They tried to start a new life, but faced insurmountable obstacles. The debts my brother had accumulated turned out to be much more serious than I had imagined, and the people he owed were not going to let him go easily. His new life with my ex-wife was a living hell for both of them. They moved to another city to hide, but no move could save them from persecution and threats. My ex-wife became an outcast, lost all her friends and supportive connections. She realized that she had made a mistake, but it was already too late. I continued to watch them fall with detached curiosity. I no longer felt any anger or hatred towards them. They punished themselves. Meanwhile, I started working on myself, trying to rebuild my life and restore faith in people. It took several years before I could meet someone I could trust. I met a woman who showed me that love can be sincere and devoted. She helped me understand that the past should not determine the future, and that it is possible to be happy even after hard trials. Eventually, I realized that the pain I was going through was necessary for my personal growth. It made me stronger and wiser. I was no longer afraid to trust people because I had learned to see their true nature. Now that I look back at everything that happened, I realize that every moment, every betrayal, and every pain was part of the path that led me to happiness. And although I will never forget what I went through, I will no longer let it rule my life.